Hey all, welcome to Challenge Accepted. I am Frank and I'm here with Thomas.
Aloha, everybody.
Today we are talking X-Men Episode 7, Bright Eyes. What'd you think of this episode?
Man, just another banger in the list of bangers. Like, this show continues to be amazing. I think this was a huge step up from the last episode. This just had so much more emotional weight, and think it's more grounded again, because we're literally back on Earth. But,
Yeah.
it was great. What about you?
Yeah, this is the emotional fallout from the Genoshan massacre that we've been waiting for, and I felt it. You really feel the weight of this episode. We also have a very clear finale ahead of us now after this episode, so we have a three-parter after this. It's going to be crazy.
Yeah, I know. I can't wait for that three-parter. But yes, you're right. Like, this sets up who I think the main bad is, and I think we also kind of called it last week too, when we were saying, yeah, Sinister's probably the boss, but there's probably still someone above him. Well, we finally find out who that is.
Yeah. All right, you ready to do the rundown on this?
Let's do it.
All right, and go.
All right, so we start off with Rogue saying the previously on, which was awesome. Nimrod is still in the master mold in the intro. Keep that in mind. Now it opens at Gambit's funeral, which is just really sad. We see all the remaining X-Men there, minus Rogue, and Nightcrawler just gives like this awesome eulogy and kind of speech. Perfect. It's so good, right? Jubilee's a little bit sad about Rogue not being there, and Wolverine kind of comforts her. But there's a really good conversation between all three of them. Then we see that Rogue attacks this base looking for Gyrick and Trask. We see that Thunderbolt Ross is there, so that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Scott blames himself and talks to the president. We'll mention it. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The rest of the team heads to Genosha to kind of help with some of the repairs, but also to look for one remaining survivor. Let's see. Yeah, Cap. Oh, no. This Rogue goes to find Trask and he runs into Cap. That's a really cool scene. Again, we'll talk about that more. There's a nod to OZT, which is Operation Zero Tolerance. Again, talking more about the villain. And then from there, we see that Roberto and Jubilee go to his mom and he basically comes out to her. Rogue then finds Trask and absorbs some of his power, seeing Nimrod. In the rubble, they find Emma Frost and her diamond form, mentioning a second mutation. Now from there, Nightcrawler goes to find Rogue in Mexico City, and we also see there's a really nice conversation, but the rest of the team is there to support her as well.
20 seconds.
Okay, we finally see Bastion, which we'll get into a lot because I mentioned it a bunch of times. And then Trask, turns out he's the Prime Sentinel. Cable then saves him. Sinister and Bastion have a conversation, and at the end we see that Bastion has kidnapped Magneto. And we hear a really famous song.
There you go. Nailed it. Okay, so the diamond mutation, of all the things I want to talk about real quick, who was it again that surprisingly had a diamond mutation?
It's Emma Frost. So the White Queen.
Yeah. I'm surprised that wasn't already known. I guess as a person who cut, to me that's like a big part of our identity. So I'm glad that they learned it now. Yeah.
No, totally. Yeah, I know. I was trying to look back in my memory to be like, wait, did she not turn into her diamond form in the animated series? Because this is very much keeping all that canon, right? So I'm like, maybe she didn't do that in the original show. But you're right. When I think Emma Frost, I think powerful telepath and diamond.
Yeah. So I was surprising. So I assumed it was somebody else. And I was like, oh yeah, it's not Emma Frost. She's already diamond. So okay, that's perfect.
Yeah, definitely. But I like that because as you read some of the comics, there are other characters, and I'm trying to think of who else right now, but that end up having these second mutations that form in, again, areas of duress or that just randomly pop out. And yeah, she's one of them, which is really, really cool.
Yeah. Let's focus on the aftermath of Genosha. They did a really good job of addressing PTSD and how people have to survive with it. And one of the survivors said, I thought it was going to be good to be survived. Now I wish I hadn't. That general idea, it was heartbreaking. And when you have the human reporter there that's trying to be sympathetic, but also Beast is kind of you just don't understand.
Tough. I know it is. It's such a crazy and tough, conversation. And I think, the showrunner and writer Bo DeMaio said, there's a couple things I pulled from real life to create this episode. One was 9/11, and the other was, and man, this is really like I feel terrible about not remembering this, but it's like it was the attack. It was a gay bar in Florida that
The
ended up.
Pulse nightclub.
Yeah, yeah, it was the Pulse nightclub
Yep.
attack. So he said he pulled from those two things, and you can even see it reflected in the conversation that Roberto has with Jubilee, where she's like, see, like, look at how they like come after us and attack us, and he's like, well, maybe it's because we come out, we're showing ourselves, and she's like, no, would you want your parents to find out the real you based on this? And like
Yeah.
that really hit me, because there's a lot of people who probably went to that club that night and weren't out or didn't tell their family, and then all of a sudden got
Wow.
killed. Yeah, and got killed, and then all of a sudden now their family knows, like, wait, why was he at that club, or why was she at that club? And then it's like they start connecting the dots, and that's just, yeah, I don't know. I think that just really, really got me.
Oh my God, that's so interesting. Yeah, because he says the line, "I don't want them to bury a stranger," and I was like, "Ooh, that's a great line." And now thinking of the Pulse nightclub stuff and how much people were doing that,
Yeah.
uh, that is
This
something else. This show's so well done.
Oh my God. The amount of lines that I just want to clip and just have on a wall
Yeah,
is incredible. Yeah, I know we're still in Genosha, but I also want to mention, like, this is very much like a Rogue episode, which I loved.
it is. Mhm.
We needed that, but also like the beginning. There's a lot of parallels too with Gambit passing away and how we
Yeah.
deal with trauma and grief, and some of the lines that Nightcrawler pulls. I'm like, God, this is just the show, man. The writing just, oh my God, it's so damn good. I
Yeah.
got some lines actually clipped out. Can I read some?
Go for it. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, perfect. One thing that Nightcrawler says, he goes, he's talking about Gambit. It goes, per his kinetic gifts, he knew there was endless faith in potential.
Yeah.
I think that was just
Which
so great.
the kinetic energy potential. I mean, it's
Right.
so
And
poetic.
right, and the
Yeah.
gambling and the, like, probability, all that stuff, it's just so good. Or he failed to see how his sins had made him a hero. And I'm just like, what a
Can that be a
line.
tattoo somewhere? I want to get a tattoo of that. That's just so fucking good.
Dude, I want Gambit just standing all badass with a staff with some cards in his
Yeah.
hand with that line above his head. Oh
Yeah.
my God, that would just, oh, I would want that poster. And then the last one is, every gambler has a tell. Modesty was Gambit's.
And that's something.
Wow, like, dude, if that doesn't speak, those lines don't speak to Gambit as a character, I don't know what will, because it's just, oh man, this show is doing such a good job of showing them individually as heroes and what makes them tick, and also like still works within the whole team dynamic, and we see that very much with Rogue. But yeah, let's get back to Genosha, because I feel like Scott and Jean, there's a lot of great moments between them. We see that there's a rift still, but
Yes.
also this is kind of leading up to maybe the downfall of Cyclops being the leader. Some people might even call him a villain.
Yeah. And I think you're right. But I do love the fact that we have, in the last time we had interactions from them, it felt a little more contentious than understanding. And in this episode, I think the Genosha attack, and we see this a lot when tragedy happens. I remember after 9/11, there was a lot of just kind of like, let's just sit with this and grieve a little bit. And I think we have it here too, where suddenly now Jean's dialogue with Scott is much more like, I know how important Madeline was to you and to Nathan. And that wasn't there before. And I think it might be a little bit more understanding now, which is nice. I still think, yes, Scott's going down a dark road, and it'll take a while for him to come back out of it. Jean might be the only way that he comes out of it. So it's good to see that she's understanding now,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think this is totally setting up Scott's fall from leadership, which is going to coincide with now Storm finding her powers, which we saw in the last episode, and coming into her strength. And then, it comes at some point, she's going, I think, to challenge him for leadership, win out. And then, Scott, it's going to go down again, a more dark path. But I think you're right. I think Jean's going to be the savior. But I just, this episode and how emotional he is from it and how he blames himself. I mean, we see it too, with survivor's guilt. There's definitely PTSD in this episode, but it's like, again, this survivor's guilt, and also like the blame he puts on himself. Like, I should have been there. I should have saved them. And it's like, he couldn't probably have done anything more than what was done there. I mean, some of the most powerful mutants in X-Men were there, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Magneto, Rogue was just doing damage, like, the Hellfire Club, Bastion, we see Emma Frost was there. Like, there's some powerful mutants that couldn't stop this attack. But
And
it's just that guilt.
with the Emma Frost thing, I like how Jean Grey can feel that there's a psychic ability out there. And that means that Cyclops' hopes were up for Madeline. And so when they see it's Emma Frost, that's when he finally breaks down. He was strong up to that point, like strong, quote unquote, up to that point. And then after it's like, oh, it's Emma Frost, and everybody's celebrating around him, he's crying because it's like, oh, it's not Madeline Pryor.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think, there's definitely that. And also it's like, remember he tells the president too, which you made a good point about who the president is.
Oh yeah, so it's President Kelly, which means it's Senator Kelly. Probably got the new gig, and Senator Kelly. If you guys watch the old X-Men movie, is a really good, I think, example of Senator Kelly, where he goes from enemy to ally of the X-Men.
Yeah, from the original X-Men movie, exactly, with Magneto and Rogue in that situation too. But I think he's even saying, if we can even find one more person, like, it'll be worth it. So you're right. I think there's this mixture of emotion Scott's going through beyond, like, I wish it was Madeline, but also, like, we did it. We found one more person.
That's
like,
good. Yeah.
we're going to keep, we're going to keep thriving. And it was just that little spark of hope I think, Genosha needed at that moment. And yeah, I just love how when they land the jet too, he's like, this is, we're showing, mutant kind that the X-Men are here to stay.
The world that X-Men are here to stay.
Yeah,
not just
that's right.
being like this attack on them has now gotten rid of the quote unquote mutant problem. No, it's still here, and we're still going to be the bastion of hope for our people.
Bastion of hope, like what you did there.
This is very much, while the world was almost on the verge of seeing Xavier's, realization, it now just tore them apart immediately right away. And normally it's humans wanting to alienate the mutants, but now I feel like this is setting up a situation where the mutants are almost wanting to circle the wagons and almost push away humanity. And that's something I don't think we've seen in mainstream X-Men storytelling in a long time, if ever. I mean, it's always kind of pitched as like, that's a Magneto thing, that's the Brotherhood thing. But now we're seeing Mutant Wide now being like, we can't trust humans. Look what they did to us. And can you blame them? You can't. So it's hard.
It is, and it's a tricky situation, right? Like, if you've been following the comics recently in the last few years, the whole Krakoa era is that the mutants, I mean, Genosha has happened, Asteroid M has already happened, but, they just need a place to call their own, and they're like, if you guys aren't going to treat us as equals, we're going to make our own place where we see ourselves equals, and you're going to have to get in line, or, you're not an enemy, or you are an enemy, you're not an ally. And so, we see that in the comics. I think it's pushing people towards that direction, but more so it shows why the world needs Professor X along with the X-Men.
Yes. I do like that with Scott kind of falling from grace, this new division, everything's setting up for Professor X to come back. So we'll see him soon. And now more people know that he's out there. There was that transmission that was sent out saying basically, Professor X is alive and he might be on his way back.
Yeah, definitely. But the whole Genosha thing, man, it just got me in so many different parts. Like, it just kind of broke every little piece of my heart, I think, in this episode. And even seeing Hank get frustrated with the reporter and just be like, you don't get it. It's just like, that's not really like a thing you think of with Hank, like he's always so level-headed. He's so, emotionally intuitive. And this time, he just kind of even snaps at somebody who wants to, show mutants in the best light as well, even though they don't really understand the plight of mutant kind.
I mean, how many times have we seen Hank Beast be the mature one in the room or the emotionally distant one in the room when Wolverine's ready to go out and slash somebody or whatever? Like, he's always the one that's like, well, guys, that's not going to look very good on CNN, and it's just... Right now, he's like, we need a Morn, get away from us. And that's what I was saying before. It's like, this is the first time in mainstream X-Men where you're seeing the X-Men say to humanity, no, we don't need you. And that's where Professor X needs to get back quickly.
It's getting crazy. So on that note, too, this, again, very much a Rogue episode. And this is where we see her deal with her grief in her own way. Wolverine says, like, loneliness is something like a war that you deal with alone. or something.
Yeah.
And we see that she goes on her own war rampage and just starts messing it up. Like I think we talked about all season, every episode has kind of showed the upper levels of different mutants' powers. I feel like this was hers.
She was near Superman. The way that, like, when Superman, or we saw, actually last episode's a better call out. We saw the Gladiator just feel unstoppable. Like, you were like, that military base has nothing on her. And they even call out the fact, like, oh, this protects the Hulk, or this keeps the Hulk in, I should say more clearly, is what Thunderbolt Ross was saying. And then she comes in and she says that line, which is such a rogue line. My daddy always says it's easier to break into prison than it is to break out, meaning explaining that she's not stronger than Hulk. It's just that place was meant to not keep him from going out, not in. So she's able to break in pretty easily. But yeah.
Totally. And it just shreds through those tank things. We see Thunderbolt Ross there. That's crazy. Another MCU connection. I mean, yes, he's from the comics, Marvel, and there's that, but I mean, this very much to me felt like William Hurst's version of Thunderbolt Ross.
It did, yeah.
Like, it kind of sounded like him. That was really weird. So I just feel like, again, we haven't even got to the cap of it all, but yeah, by the way, I got both going today, all right? I got the X-Men hat and the Cap shirt, so I love that. But yes, it's Rogue dealing with her grief and how she handles it, and she's not handling it very well. We kind of see towards the end that she snaps, is about to kill Trask, not knowing that, he's going to be...
I want to throw in there real quick, she kills Trask. Not about to kill Trask. She lets go. So I think, and with the way she attacks the base, the way she... kind of turns on Captain America. I think she's not quite she does understand it. Captain America is looking at this logically. I can't be a guy in an American flag standing in the middle of Mexico City punching people. It doesn't make sense. It can't happen. Right. That's Captain America. But I do like how it shows the division between, like, the Avengers and the X-Men in relationship to United States government and what they stand for. Because the X-Men are very much away from the government, while despite Civil War and stuff like that, the Avengers almost have to work in lockstep with the U.S. government. When they don't, it's a big story.
You're right. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. This shows that the X-Men are, even if they try to be on the political side, again, talking to President Kelly, they're never going to be fully accepted. They're never going to be, defended in the right way? That's not the right word, but basically they're not going to be
protected,
backed up.
Really. Yeah.
Protected, thank you, by our government, where the Avengers kind of have a little bit more of that, right? Like, they have S.H.I.E.L.D., they work with the U.S. government, like, they're more of a government entity than the X-Men are, and this kind of further shows that, especially with Cap. I mean, Cap is kind of right, but I don't blame Rogue at all. It's like, okay, fine, if you don't want to help me when you know that our people were slaughtered, then I don't care. And then just, like, tosses his shield a million miles away, which I loved.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, Rogue, you're doing wrong the way you're handling this, but you're mourning, and the best thing for us to do is just to be with you. I know we're like, this is a cartoon and we're watching something happen, but you're almost just like, let it out, Rogue. And thank God for Nightcrawler. I can't remember his regular name. Anyways, Nightcrawler.
Kurt Wagner.
Thank you, Kurt. Who says you're mourning two people? Because so many people are just attributing this to Gambit. The guilt that must be going through Rogue's mind, thinking that Gambit died, assuming I chose Magneto over him. Like, she must be just crushed. And the fact that she's also mourning the loss of Magneto, somebody who she did have a bond with, she's unstoppable right now. And the only thing you can do is give her support and kind of blunt her attacks as much as you can without stopping her.
Yeah. I mean, so it's funny because she did end up choosing Gambit right at the end of last episode, or I guess 2 episodes ago, but she never got to tell Gambit that.
Yeah.
And, and she still had some connection. So he's so right. I love that they're bringing in this whole idea of, like, they know they're adopted siblings, that Mystique kind of adopted Rogue and brought her in, and they never hit that home in the original animated series. Like, it's something from the comics, and there's, like, an interesting relationship there, but that doesn't get brought up, I feel like, a lot. And so that was beautiful. And then as she looks up and they're in Mexico City, my ears perked up when I heard Mexico City too, because we've heard something about the future upcoming Captain America Brave New World, about that also taking place in Mexico. So I'm like, okay, there's a connection here. But as she's crying and as Nightcrawler's comforting her, she looks up and the rest of the X-Men are there, just like, hey, we're here for you. And then she kind of smiles a little bit. It's not like everything's better, but she's like, at least, like, my family's here. My family's here to, like, comfort me. And it's just, like, a beautiful moment in this episode.
to jump in and interrupt you as I always do. Now let's compare that to the image of when they kind of pull back and you see the X-Men kind of take form, take shape, like a hero stance, and you're like, oh, they're here for her. Now mirror that to later on when she lets go of Trask. Or not Trask, Gyrick, right?
Yeah.
It's Trask.
No, it's Trask. You're right.
When she lets go of Trask and kills him, all of a sudden they're looking at her like, what have you done?
Right.
And that's, I think, the line when they no longer can support her and understand her situation.
Right.
Because now you're beyond what we do as X-Men.
Yeah, exactly. It's like if Batman killed, right? I mean, it's the whole reason
Exactly,
people got
great
mad.
example. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's Zack Snyder's Batman because he was killing people. It's like, no, that's the line he doesn't cross.
Yeah.
Or even Superman, right? And that's, again, but anyways, so she has now crossed that line. Literally, too, she drops him off the side of a building. That's a hard line, and they're like, we can't cross it even metaphorically. So yes, this show, oh my god, the visualizations of things in this show is incredible, but also like different processes of grief. And everybody's kind of handling it, I guess, not in different ways, or yes in different ways, but also in different steps. And
Different steps,
man, then they kind of go, we see that Trask is not just the scientist. We also see that there's these different robots as they're going through, and then these android things, and his prime directive turns on, which we also get hints to throughout this episode with OZT. She's like, what's OZT? What's OZT? Well, in the comics, it stands for Operation Zero Tolerance, which was formed by Bastion. And Bastion basically was turning, what's the next evolution of Sentinels? Well, turning like humans into Sentinels so that they can kind of blend in with society. And so we see that Trask is now also one of these prime Sentinels, and then turns around and starts like epic battle with the X-Men.
So a couple things that are brought up, and we're going to, let's start shifting over to the Bastion side of things. I think is a good move for us. We're told, actually real quick, I do want to mention that we do have Cable pop up.
Yes, thank you. I was like, come on, man, land the plane.
Scott now knows. And I'm like, he needed that so much. If there's anything that's going to pull Scott back from going down that dark path, it might be the fact that Nathan's standing in front of him.
Totally. And it's such a Cable line. He's like, yeah, I'm here, Dad. Let's get over it. It's just like, wow, I mean, in this way, he's kind of even older than his dad, which is such a weird thought, but that is out there. You're right. And he's, that probably is going to give Scott so much hope. Plus, Jean kind of felt what Madeline felt in those last moments.
She did, yeah. Which I think is another thing that's going to come up later on is Jean now in that moment almost has confirmation that Madeline died, but died the best way she could expect to, is by seeing her son.
True, but also it makes Jean closer to Cable too. Like in the comics, it's like she almost feels like his mom because she's so close, and they have like a psychic connection too. So that I think is important for not only Scott's relationship but Jean's relationship with Cable.
Yeah. Okay, now let's move on to the Bastion side of things. There's a line he says to Mr. Sinister later on, which anytime Mr. Sinister's on screen, I'm on board. He says.
His voice is so good, right? Like, sorry to cut you off, but like Sinister's voice in this show is so good.
So good. But he mentions to Sinister, he's like, you and the villains have been failing. You and the old villains basically have been failing since 92, which is definitely a clear line like, hey, X-Men, which is cool.
Right.
But then in this episode, if we think about it, we have Mr. Sinister being shown he's not the main bad guy. Trask is dead. Gyrick is dead. So they are really kind of like flushing out the old villains, and it's time for a new era. And not only that, Bastion with the OZT is essentially saying, not only that, I have been a part of those plans the entire time. Who knows how long Trask has been, Sentinel Prime. So
True. Yeah.
It's kind of like he's been a puppet master this behind the scenes for a while now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, he's a great villain. He's so powerful, but also, in the comics, he aligns with a team, or like, I don't know, the team's not the right word, a cult basically.
Yeah.
In the beginning of the show, the Friends of Humanity, and that's kind of where he gets indoctrinated in the comics. So yeah, he's really been there the whole time, kind of just playing things behind the scenes. We've been getting hints to it all season, whether it was the picture in Forge's house or him kind of walking through what some people thought was the Hellfire Gala or the party at Genosha.
Hmm.
Like, dude's been there the whole time, and I love this nod. He's a great villain, and also voiced by a really famous actor. I want to say it's Theo James. My wife instantly picked it up because she was watching The Gentleman on Netflix, and he's the main
Yeah.
actor in it. And he just had this like really creepy evil tone, but also just shit talking Sinister and the other villains. Like, you guys have not been getting it done. I love the 92 call out too, because it like brings us right back to like, oh yeah, that's when this show's supposed to be taking place, but also like the animated series are still canon. So, if you want to see how the villain's been failing for 5 years, like, go back and watch that. Like,
Not just that. In that first season, they fight Nimrod and win.
yeah, that's a good point. That's a
Yeah.
good point. Yeah, Nimrod is supposed to be like ridiculously OP, and there's like a big gap in my comic history. Like, I started reading like in the 90s, because of the animated series.
Of course.
And then, middle school and high school though, I wanted to be cool. I'm like, I'm not gonna read comics or talk comics. Like,
Yeah.
and video games took over. I was way more into video games. But then, now kind of with what they've been doing and Jonathan Hickman restarting the Krakoa era, God, it's been so good. And Nimrod is just insanely OP. So
Yeah.
this is so cool. They're just doing things so right in this.
For those who are new, including myself, on all this is kind of now we're way beyond what I know. Can you explain Bastion and a little bit of his origin story so people kind of get an idea of who we're looking at here?
Yeah. So the way Bastion comes about in the comics is through this. It's a MacGuffin. It's called the Perilous Siege. So it's like this diamond thing that can also, depending on who's around it, will turn into a gate, and it can change in size and shape. But in the comics, the X-Men are fighting Nimrod, and the Master Mold's there, and Rogue, Nimrod, and the Master Mold get hit into the Perilous Siege. Now, that device can sometimes reset your life. You can choose a new career. You can choose choose to not have powers, or just everything can be reset. Yeah. Or there's also sometimes a side effect where whoever gets knocked in will merge with whoever else. So in the comics, Nimrod and Master Mold then merge, becoming Bastion in a human form. So basically, an OP Sentinel that looks like a human. And Bastion doesn't know. The way he gets that name is because he finds this lady who basically like takes him in and is like, oh, poor baby, names him Sebastian. He later sees Friends of Humanity complaining about, how mutants are destroying the country. And he's like, oh yeah, they're right. Joins the Friends of Humanity and then becomes this being basically that's, dead set on destroying all mutants.
Yeah. And then, so when you were calling out in the start of the show, the fact that we're seeing Nimrod in the side of the Master Mold, it's a hint to that. Yeah.
Thank you. Exactly. And it's been there for the last 2 episodes. Like, Nimrod has literally been sitting in the chest of the Master Mold. And it's like, okay, of course they're going to be merging to form Bastion, which we've kind of now seen behind the scenes.
I love how the show's been, it's been hinting to Bastion for a while now. It's giving us everything we want, little teasers here and there. It's so well written, and we talk often about the voice actors. I mean, they're great voice actors, both new and old. But we have to remember that the writing on this thing is airtight, and we're very lucky to have it back. I want to kind of speculate a little bit. I think people are saying it should happen. I think it's going to happen. What are your thoughts on Spider-Man 98?
Yeah, man, I think it's going to happen. Somebody mentioned at WonderCon, talking to Jake Castorino, you always see him as like the executive producer, and I think he took over the responsibilities of Beau DeMaio. But he comes from what I understand, like a big background in animation. Mm-hmm. So like, I feel like we're kindred spirits, man. Like everything, even from things that are not pop culture. Like I follow him on Instagram, and he likes a lot of things that I like. I'm like, bro, we're boys. Like we gotta hang out or something at one point. But I think, I think he's hinting that could be a possibility, but I don't know. Regardless, we're getting so many X-Men tie-ins. I'm not super upset about it because we're getting a lot of MCU. I mean, again, Thunderbolt Ross being in this is really interesting, and mentioning the Hulk specifically, that's where we first met Thunderbolt Ross in the MCU, was in the Hulk movie. Yeah. So it's just like, sorry, a lot of notification going. There's just Yeah, I feel like there's so many tie-ins that we're gonna get something that's gonna lead into another animated series for the MCU.
Yeah, this might become an expansion, another version, not the MCU, but it, like its own connected universe, more so than it was in the past. Like I know that's something that Fox just couldn't invest in the '90s, but now that we have Disney in charge of it all, and they're very much about connected universes, we might just get this whole connected universe. I'd be fully on board with it after the success, the writing, the performance, and the animation of X-Men '97. Like, let's get a Captain America, let's get a Spider-Man. Just go. Iron Man is another character that popped up in the
Oh
old
yeah,
days.
the
Like, let's get
Fantastic
them all.
Four
Oh,
cartoons.
that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
man. I got one last question though, because this has also been a discourse going around the internet, which is we talked about the writing and how like there's just such a good understanding of these characters and how the story's working, but there's been a lot of people saying like they need to get Bo DeMaio back. And what do you feel about that? Because he wrote a lot of these episodes.
Yeah, I would say Bo DeMaio's talent is non-negotiable, right? He did a phenomenal job.
Yeah.
But what we don't know is why he was let go. If it
Right.
was let go for performance on this, that's just crazy.
Right.
I don't believe that's the case. So, for those calling for his return, let's learn more about Bo DeMaio and why he was let go. Um, People that I know are saying it's something different, saying that it's worse. So I would wait until we know what that is first. Yeah.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Yeah, if whatever he did again, to your point, was performance based that got him fired, then bring that dude back immediately. But if there's
Immediately,
something,
yeah.
yeah, if there's something more heinous, like we get it, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, gosh, what a great show. This has just returned to form for me. I don't know, like I've watched a lot of stuff this year already, and this might be my favorite show of the year. This might be my, and not even just for animation. Like I normally classify like animation and then just shows, but like this might sound crazy. This is above Shogun for me.
I was gonna
This-
ask you because I'm no Shogun right now. Like I have one more episode to go, and I'm just like, son of a bitch, this is good.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like getting everything. Like, being Japanese, I have my Japanese pride going on, and then
Yeah.
being like X-Men super nerd, it's like I got that going on too. So,
Yeah.
but I honestly feel like this is hitting me more in the feels than Shogun even did. God, yeah, I'm gonna watch this episode like 3 more times before next week.
I can't wait for it to be done so I can watch it all over again. I was talking to Daniel about how like in 2023 you kept talking about like this is the year in gaming. It's incredible how many games are coming out. I think we're going to look back at this year, say this was the year of television because beyond these two, we have so many other things as well where we're going to have to take a serious look at this year and see what strengths came out of it and what we can learn going forward in TV production. And I think taking a chance on animation is one of them. Yeah.
Man, well said. Well said.
All right, guys, please let us know what you guys thought about episode 7 of X-Men 97. Thank you very much for hanging out with us. Hit us up on all the social medias. We're loving Threads, by the way. I got to say, I think I figured it. I think I figured out my social media home, and it's Threads. I'm loving it over there. So come
Yeah,
and
you're
join us.
dominating, man. Yeah.
I don't want to say that.
You're
God.
dominating. I'll say it for you. You're freaking dominating. Geek Freaks is flying over there. And yeah, we're having a lot of fun on Challenge Accepted. And we want to
Yes.
hear from you guys what you think about these episodes because, gosh, I mean, are we, overly dramatic about it? Because I don't know if I care, but like, I think we do care what you guys think. And I have to say about this one because,
Absolutely.
so good.
Yeah. All right, guys. I will see you next week. Bye.
Bye. Aloha.